So I really want to thank Maria Clara for the invitation and for the hard, the difficult. I want to apologize for the trouble I gave you, trying to fit me in here due to my other engagements. Thank you very much. I want to also thank all these organizations for funding my research and for Google for releasing the data that I'm going to talk about in a few minutes. Corpus linguistics, first of all, what's a corpus? We're talking about a computer corpus. We can define it in many different ways. For instance, a principled collection of texts in bold type, because that's the raw data. Yeah, we don't want numbers. We don't want individual sentences. We don't want individual words. We want text or text samples. Yeah, it's chosen to represent a language variety, a linguistic community, individual speakers or speaker groups, stored in electronic form for the purpose of linguistic research. Okay, it's not the speakers that are stored, yes, all right, so it's a text collection that's stored. So corpus linguistics, it's the area of linguistic inquiry that specializes in collecting, devising methods for and analyzing electronic corpora. We do use both quantitative and qualitative techniques. And it's today, contemporary corpus linguistics goes back, I think, to the work done by Charles Fries in the 50s and John Sinclair in the 60s. And also, if you want to go back in time, you can go all the way back to the Middle Ages with the work done by the monks. They were doing indexes to the Bible, by hand. So the quicks, which are today called quicks or concordances. So all of those things, all of those traditions are sort of populating the idea of contemporary corpus linguistics. Even though the work done in vocabulary selection and language teaching in the early part of the last century in Japan or in the US, all of those things were sort of, trends that are still present in contemporary corpus linguistics. Okay, I draw a line between corpus linguistics and computational linguistics. I think corpus linguistics has its roots in the humanities, whereas computational linguistics and natural language processing, they, I think, have their roots in engineering and artificial intelligence. There's a debate about whether corpus linguistics is a method or a field. I'm much more in favor of seeing it as a field rather than a method that can be applied to other areas. I think you can do that for certain, but I like to see corpus linguistics as a field in itself. Okay, our research group is devoted to corpus linguistics. JELC. That's our website. We started in 1998. We officially founded the group in 2008. Sorry, I forgot to start the timer. Okay. So we are a CNPq official group, yes. We do both schools of corpus linguistics, let's say the Birmingham School, founded by John Sinclair, and the so-called Flagstaff School of Corpus Linguistics, founded by Doug Berber. So there are important differences between these two major schools. One favors whole language corpora, the other one register-specific corpora. One comes from a lexicographic tradition, the other one from a sociolinguistic variationist tradition. One is much more lexis-centered, the other is more grammar-centered. One looks at more generally at patterning, the other one at dimensions of variation. And in terms of the lexical units, the Birmingham School favors looking at collocation, whereas the Flagstaff School looks at lexical bundles, word sequences. But I think these are two strands of the same program, and they come together nicely, I think. So the whole idea is for corpus linguistics to look at systematicity in corpora. So from the Birmingham School, we tend to look at it in terms of a confluence or convergence of patterns, whereas in the Berber school, Flagstaff school, we tend to look at it from a dispersion point of view. So you have the centripetal forces operating on that side, and on this side, it's more centrifugal. So patterning, what was that? Patterning, where's the rest of it? Yes, I was here, wasn't I? Yeah. Yes, patterning and variation, all right. Okay. So at JELC, we do both of these schools. Come on, just move on. All right. Okay, so some of the recent projects. We do a lot of corpus design projects. So these are some of the recent corpora that we have collected. Some of these are available online. You can go, for instance, to sketchengine.co.uk, where you can access the top 2 corpora. Very large, registered, diverse corpora of Portuguese. We have lots of projects looking at patterning, lexical patterning, textual patterning. These are some of the projects that we have done recently, going on, from linguistic structures all the way down to sort of more cultural representations, or even a dictionary of collocation is in the works for Brazilian Portuguese, glossaries for breast cancer, Freemasonry, other things like that, even forensic linguistics. Metaphor, yes. So we do a lot of work in metaphor and language. So one of our main projects is looking at how we can use computers to retrieve metaphors that are in texts. Yeah. So we have done several versions of a software program that tries to identify the metaphors automatically. We're looking at ways to estimate the frequency of metaphor in text, and also to see how we can apply machine learning techniques to identification of metaphor. Okay, MD analysis. I'm going to give you a definition soon, but these are some of the projects that we have done recently, looking at the registered dimensions, meaning the different kinds of text, the different genres, yes, how they interact, how they're different from one another in Brazilian Portuguese as a whole, in the Brazilian press more specifically, and even in cultural artifacts such as pop music, movies, the Time magazine, and in classroom situations, learner writing, and aviation, and the internet genres or registers, yes. And the one at the bottom is the one I'm going to showcase a little bit in the next minutes or so. These are some of our forthcoming publications where we detail some of these projects. So multidimensional analysis is the method that I want to focus on now. Is a corpus-based method to identify the salient linguistic co-occurrence patterns in the language, and then to compare the registers. And by registers, we mean genres, text varieties, yes, in the linguistic space defined by the co-occurrence patterns. We use multivariate statistical techniques to enable us to do that. And we have recently applied that method to Google Books. And the aim is to try to come up with, quote-unquote, dimensions of cultural variation. In other words, what it means to represent a culture as in books. So what does it mean to be American, British, Brazilian, and can we get to that by looking at the textual data. And also we want to see to what extent those representations change over time. So our central construct for that is collocation. Normally, collocation is simply the association between words at close range, but here we are extending it to mean the associations that can reveal socio-historical representations through the words that are used, how the words come together and how they signal cultural representations. I think you all know you can access Google Books pretty easily. You type in a string and you get a lot of results. You can also see how those strings are used, how frequently they're used over time. You can get a nice chart like that. But the problem with that interface is that you have to know in advance, ahead of time, what you're looking for. And we don't know what cultural representations are, how they are worded, so this interface is no good for us. So we had to download the whole of the N-gram collection and do some bottom-up work to mine the N-gram collection to see how the words were being used. You may have heard about culturomics, so other people that are associated with culturomics also use Google data for different purposes, but they normally use the Google Books N-gram viewer, which I just showed, and they don't do this sort of bottom-up kind of work that we are doing. So the size of the corpus that we use is about 500 billion words. It's all the books that is in the Google Books collection from 1850 through 2008, 159 years. Okay, all those words, just so we can get our heads around that, it means, okay, an average person encounters on average 15,000 words a day, all right, and lives around 70 years. So 500 billion words amount to 33 million days worth of language encounters, or the whole population of cities like Sacramento, California, Brighton, UK, or Niterói here in Brazil over 70 years. If you could just get all the things that they're speaking and reading and writing and collect that over 70 years for that whole population, that's the amount of words that we are looking at. So that is just to give you an idea of the size of that. And that's the data, all right? It's just lists. We can't have access to the actual complete books. Okay, now, I'm just going to give you one or two of these preliminary results. For American, this is our first factor showing, can you see a break around here? Yeah. All right. These breaks are important because they show you how or where those patterns change over time. So we see a break in the representation around between 1940 and 1950. So it's a pre-World War II and post World War II break. We also see some spikes around 1910 and 1860, but mostly around here, yeah? So now if we look at the words that are being used in the books around those decades, for pre-World War II, these are some of the main words, the most frequent words. For post-World War II, those words, all right? And so there's a clear break between, sorry, my time's up. So between, for instance, American people. American people is used a lot previous to 1950, yeah? Whereas American society is pretty much stronger after that, and it peaks around 1970. So you see this different conceptualizations of what it means to be American. And we have lots of those. These are the main words that are, signaling those two periods. So we have words that characterize the people and the nation. Yes, an individual focus on the American person. Whereas after World War II, we tend to see this more social focus on the American society as a more mature kind of a human form of organization. I'm just going to skip ahead to this one. This is a more contemporary representation. You see it speaking around the late part of the last century. Any ideas what that might be? Huh? So for pre-1980s, we have high frequencies for those words. For after 1980s, those words. So we see basically an opposition between large-scale systems and small-scale elements. So American system, American labor, and so on, versus American men and women, and so on and so forth. Okay, my last point is just for Brazilian. So we have data for American, Brazilian, and British. This is for Brazilian, our main factor, showing a break. See the break up there? Yeah, around the beginning of last century. Yes. So these are the most frequent words for that top part of the chart. Yes, empire, sugar, movement, slave, so on, army, Portuguese. Whereas for the other part of the century, we see these words. So basically, we see a representation of Brazilian in terms of the focus on the war and the trade and imperial concerns and empire, the Brazilian empire period versus the republic period, whereas the population and the economy gain a much more clear focus. So these are some references. Some references, and that's it. Some interesting books from our group that you might want to have a look at. And so, thank you very much.
Thank you, Tony.